Okay. Can you go to the next slide for me, Brittany? Thank you. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Supported Education Services for Exploring Students' Educational Preferences. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or the MHTTC, housed at Rutgers, the School of Health Professions, the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Sean Karazak, and I'm the program evaluator for the center, and I'll be introducing today's training event. Next slide. So the MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of behavioral health workforce and deliver evidence-based and promising practices. We provide training on services spanning mental illness prevention, treatment, and recovery supports. We also provide trainings to related workforces such as first responders, primary care providers, to provide effective services for those with mental health conditions. And we also utilize supplemental fundings to support school teachers and staff to address student mental health. Next slide. The MHTTC provides training and technical assistance focused on evidence-based practices for people with serious mental health conditions, including illness managed recovery, supported housing, supported employment, supported education, comprehensive school-based mental health services, wellness and recovery, mental health and recovery among Hispanic and Latino populations. And we also offer online self-paced educational courses that cover all of these topics. Next slide. All of our trainings, programs, products, and services are available at no cost. Next slide. If you'd like to keep up to date with all of our activities, please sign up to receive be on our email list. You can sign up by scanning this QR code, and I'll also put a link in the chat. Just a minute. Next slide for me. And after this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. This feedback is helpful for us to know how our trainings are going and make improvements for future trainings. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So in advance, we want to thank you for your feedback. And at the end, I'll post a link for that survey. Next slide. We just want to let you know that today we are recording our video, and the webinar will be posted onto our website. Next slide. Please note that this presentation is prepared for the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center under an agreement from SAMHSA. The opinions expressed are the views of the speaker and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. Next slide. Your interaction. So we'd encourage you to interact with our presenters during the webinar. We encourage you to use the chat feature. Today we have it set up that you can speak also. So we just ask that you mute your microphone, and if Brittany is asking you some questions, you can interact with the chat. But as we go along, I'll collect any questions and I'll pass them along to Brittany so she can answer them for you. Next slide for me. The MHTTC network is committed to using affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language as all of our activities. Next slide. And we want to let you know about the new 3-digit dialing code for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So 998. 998 is not just a suicide crisis line. It's for anyone experiencing a mental health crisis, substance abuse crisis, or any kind of emotional distress. It's also for people that are concerned about someone experiencing a crisis. So you connect by calling or texting 988, and all calls or texts are responded to by a trained counselor. Next slide. So our presenter today is Brittany Stone, who's a lecturer at Rutgers, the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. So I will turn it over to Brittany to introduce herself and start our presentation today.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everyone, for those of you who are here on the East Coast. As Sean said, my name is Brittany Stone. I'm a lecturer here in the Department of Psych Rehab. Most of my work as a researcher, a trainer, a service provider has all been focused on promoting the career development of people with mental health conditions, specifically college-age populations, helping people to access and complete post-secondary education. I currently teach within our department, as well as work as a co-investigator on 2 NIDLR-funded research grants. One of those grants is developing a CBT web-based intervention for college students with PTSD and emerges supported education services. And the other one is also a manualized intervention. And this one is creating an SED manual to be used specifically for career and technical education and for individuals in that. There's both a workbook for the students themselves to use, as well as practitioners to be able to support students in completing CTE, or career and technical education. If you have any questions about me or my background, feel free to email me after the presentation. So today we have about 90 minutes. It's part 1 of a 3-part supported education series where my colleague Amy Banco and I are going to be talking a little bit about some of the foundational elements to providing supported education services and helping college students with mental health conditions access and then complete post-secondary education, and really take them from that process of exploring education to getting to cap and gown. Today's session is focusing primarily on practitioner strategies to support the exploration of educational interests, connecting preferences and values, and really seeing about how those types of things can lead to the development of academic goals, as well as identifying level of education. In our part 2 session, we're going to be talking about ways to support students through the application process, securing financial aid, identifying transportation, looking at some of those barriers that students may have to matriculation and the things that they're going to need to do to be able to get into school. And then part 3 really focuses more on our KEEP phase of service when we're coming from a choose, get, keep, leave perspective. And in that KEEP training, which is part 3, that one we're going to talk more about identifying student skills, campus and community-based resources, and doing some accommodation education for students with mental health conditions to really support them in that matriculation. So our objectives for today's session, we're going to talk about that choose phase of supported education services. If you're not familiar with that, I'm going to introduce it. We're going to explore strategies to determine educational choice for students. And that means looking at the role of interests, values, and preferences, and how that goes into career planning. And really to be able to think about how you can help individuals translate those things into their vocational options. And then look at, levels of education that may be available for students and facilitate that process of them choosing their career and educational path. So as Sean said, we have today's session structured so that you're able to participate either in the chat or, verbally. You can unmute and share your responses and ask your questions. I encourage questions. I have a lot packed in here for today, and anything that we don't get to, we can touch on over the next couple sessions together, or you can, connect with me outside of the training. It would be, fantastic if you would take a minute and within the chat, put in, where you're currently working, if you're currently supporting people with career development, whether that's connecting to employment or connecting to education, just so I can kind of look back and get a sense on where you're coming from and the type of work you're doing. So I want you to think for a minute about your own career path and career choice. And this is a really helpful part of the process. When we're working with other people to think about educational goals and employment goals, it's helpful to reflect on our own career choices and our own career path. For some of us, we might have known exactly what we wanted to do at a really early age. And for others, our path has been a little bit curvier, a little windy, and various opportunities have led us in different directions. So when you think about your path, again, feel free to share in the chat. How did you choose your career? Was it by chance? Was it by choice? how old were you when you landed at, the thing that you're currently doing or what you wanted to do? Was this what you started out doing, or were you a career changer? When did you know what you wanted to do? So everybody's career journey is going to look a little bit different, and that's okay. Part of the work that we do in supporting people's educational and employment journey is really being able to normalize that process and create individualized pathways for people. So, sometimes people can get really stuck on, other people my age are doing this, or other people my age are already there and have already accomplished those things. So recognizing ways that we can normalize that, we can talk about and use our own journey can be really helpful in being able to connect and engage with people. Supported ed specialists, employment ed, I'm just checking the chat. Oh, fantastic. So we've got a bunch of people in education and employment. I love seeing that. Prior to working at the university, I worked in community-based employment services doing supported education and supported employment. So those community-based services are awesome. So our supported education approach that we practice here in New Jersey, and that I often do a lot of my trainings and structure my framework for supported education, follows the choose, get, keep, leave model of psychiatric rehabilitation. And this helps people to make choices about their path for education or training and get the right education and training opportunities that fit with their interests, values, preferences, and what their goals are. And it's designed to move people through that process of coming in and saying, I know I want to go back to school, or I know I want to work, I want to do something. For some people, it's I don't know what though. And then through that choose phase, we're helping them select it. For other individuals, they're coming in and they're saying, I know exactly what I want to do. And then again, that's going to look a little bit different. So no matter where somebody is coming in, using the choose, get, keep, leave model can really help to guide the types of intentional services that you're delivering to them. So it's really a good framework to use for practitioners to be able to formulate your plans, structure your services, and really anticipate then what the next steps are going to be in working with students. So within the principles of the choose, get, keep, leave model, they really follow, a psychiatric rehabilitation-based approach. We focus a lot on self-determination, helping students to make their own choices, setting their own educational goals, and being really, recovery minded and strengths focused in that way. We also, that provides that ability for a student to accept responsibility for their own educational process, for them to learn how to make these decisions, learn how to gather the material, and do it in an intentional way. Through, this process, students are actively involved and engaged, really working as a partner with the SED practitioner in determining the criteria for their success and satisfaction in that environment, as well as continuing to evaluate their own progress along with the practitioner, and thinking about what do I want to change? What do I want to modify? What do I want to continue to work on? What doesn't feel satisfying for me? And it's focused on having a foundational partnership, built on respect, trust, growth, and that teamwork. There's also the development of participant skills and environmental supports and resources. And it provides support for the whole process, so it's not just, okay, we do this little thing over here, but it's really that we're going to help with all phases of this educational journey that somebody is on. So historically, the choose, get, keep, leave or choose, get, keep model was developed with 3 phases of service: choose, get, and keep. More recently, and in a lot of the literature on career services, you'll see that leave is sometimes added in. And that's, helps to really intentionally choose and think about the consequences of exiting from education. Now, within our aim of the choose phase, it's to select an educational direction, a training program, an employment pathway that's compatible with the person's values, skills, and learning needs. And that's what we're going to focus a lot on today. The GET phase, which we'll talk more about in session 2, aims to secure admission to the preferred educational or vocational training program, or employment opportunity for the individual. In that phase, we talk a lot about financial aid, about transportation, about managing barriers, about putting in wellness practices, completing admission requirements, getting letters of recommendation, gathering transcripts. What do you do if, you have loans that you haven't repaid or that are in default, and how do we clarify and rectify those things? And then within our KEEP phase of service, the goal here is to remain in school, or employment, to increase levels of success and satisfaction within those environments, and really continue to enhance the person's skills, providing support, resource connection and development, accommodation, education, all along the way, connecting the person to campus and community-based supports. And then that leave phase, which is kind of newer within the literature, it's geared to intentionally choose and take steps to either pause education if necessary. That might be taking a medical leave. It might be recognizing, this major isn't what I thought it was going to be, or this educational environment isn't the right fit for me. But it also might be to terminate education and move to employment or a different goal, or to complete education, or to transfer from, an associate's level program to a bachelor's program, or to consider grad school after a bachelor's level program. So it's helping the person through that choice and that process as well, and mitigating any negative consequences that might arise as far as satisfactory academic progress and those things. So as I said, today we're going to be focusing primarily on the work that's done in this choose phase of supported education services. So some of the tasks that are really critical to do within this phase are helping the person to clarify their interests, values, and preferences, and based on those things, be able to identify their personal criteria for selecting an educational environment. So, again, when people are unclear what they want to do, or aren't sure exactly what profession or how to take the job that they want to do and figure out what educational program or training they're going to need, this phase of service becomes really important. Within the choose phase, it's foundational. We're laying a lot of the groundwork, and we're really helping a person to build insight into themselves, build insight into the labor market and the world of work, and thinking about what are the opportunities after my educational program is finished. Is this going to be what I want to do? What is the salary going to look like? Are the jobs available? So we're taking what they know about themselves. We're taking what we know about the, labor market and the world of work. And then we're thinking about what are the educational and training programs that are accessible to me, that I can access to get the education that I need for my career pathway. So looking at this in a little bit more detail, we help people to clarify their values. We might be designing different activities, and we're going to talk a lot about those for values clarification. We're going to infer the different themes that come up through these activities. We're going to analyze people's past experiences. So talking a lot about what are you interested in? What have you done in the past? What transferable skills do you have? What skills might make you well suited for different types of professions or occupations, and thinking about the reaction to these different experiences, both the people that were in those environments, their job activities or past educational activities, and then the environments that they've been in. And then from there, we start to infer what the personal criteria is. So what are your future preferences looking like based on what you know about yourself and the labor market and these past experiences? And really translating that into what are the things that I'm going to use to identify what education or training is going to be right for me. And all of these things are done with the main goal in mind of selecting what your occupational and educational direction is going to be. All of these things are guiding those choices. Just like for many of us, they've been a guide for our own choices, understanding our preferences, understanding what we're good at, understanding what we enjoy doing, and how our values connect to that. So within this phase of service, we use a lot of different strategies. And that's everything from interviewing to doing assessments of, levels of readiness and interest inventories, values assessments, potentially testing, for some programs require testing if you're connecting to vocational rehabilitation. Sometimes they require different types of assessments. And then being able to collaborate with other supports that the person might have, whether that's professional support or familial or friendship-based supports, to be able to start, building those connections and thinking about employment and educational goals in the future. So the first step here is to really help people take a look at what their values are and how that connects to employment and how that connects to educational goals. So our values are the things that we believe to be important and have worth. There are deeply held beliefs. These things inform our attitudes, our behaviors, our ideas. They impact our day-to-day actions. They impact the people that we have in our lives that we associate with, the decisions that we make, sometimes, the clothes that we wear, the places that we go and, frequent. And our values often guide our decisions and our behaviors. For, some of our values are really core values and things that we've held on to for a long time. For some of us, our values were developed early on in life, and for others, as we've had various life experiences, it shaped the things that we value, and they fluctuate through our lifespan. We all also have some like peripheral values. So we've got these core values and peripheral ones that carry different weights. So when we're working with people on exploring educational opportunities and starting to think about the type of work they want to do and the type of educational experiences they want to have, helping them connect to values, both their personal values and their career values, become really important. When we do work that's aligned with our values, we tend to be more successful and satisfied in that work. And again, think about some of the jobs that you've held in the past. Have you ever worked in an organization or worked doing a job where it really wasn't aligned with the things that you valued? I know one of my early jobs in mental health, it was a much more medically based day treatment type of program. And I didn't last very long there because it really rubbed up against my belief in recovery and my belief in looking at the strengths focused services. And it was very much about the pathology of things and medical treatment and things being wrong with people. And it just, every Sunday night I would, more than just like the Sunday night blues, it was dread, like my jaw would lock up. I would feel headachy because it wasn't values aligned for me. So we want to help people connect to things that are going to be aligned with their values to increase their rate of success and satisfaction. And when we think about it from a work value or career value perspective, we're talking about the way that you feel about the work that you're doing and the contribution that you're making. People who pursue work congruent with their values feel more successful and satisfied in the careers that they do. So, consider some of your own. Where have your values come from? What has shaped your values? Are there certain people that have influenced those things, the values that you've held on to or the values that have gotten discarded? And then think about, what are some of your career values? If you were looking to change jobs, what would be some of the things that would be important to you? Is it being able to use your talents and your skills and abilities? Is it being able to have autonomy in your work? Is it able to have flexibility in your day? Is it being able to have fun within your day? Is it interacting with other people? Is it helping? Is it creating? What are the things that you value? Feel free to put some of those in the chat if there are certain work values that you have. So some other common work values include, working within your community, having flexibility in your work, having, a livable wage, helping people, working independently or working as part of a team, having opportunities for advancement, being creative, having supportive coworkers. Having a work-life balance, exactly. Having a good supervisor, that one can be tremendously impactful. So ONET also further goes on to define some of the work values that they use within that occupational guide. So ONET is it's a national career resource. It gathers thousands of different occupational titles and information about different professions from all over the country. We're going to go more into ONET a little bit later in the presentation. But when you're looking at some of these federal guides and federal sites, you'll see that they have kind of these like 6 or 8 standard values that they have. And you'll see these pop up on some job descriptions. So I want to just touch on some of these things. And as I'm going through them, think about what ones really ring true for you or are, you might be seeing in some of the people that you're working with. So the first is achievement. Occupations that satisfy this give, people the ability to use their talents, to have a feeling of accomplishment. It's about what have I done at the end of the day? What have I been able to achieve, put together, show for the work that I'm doing? Next is independence. And this allows people to work on their own, to be able to make decisions. It corresponds with a sense of autonomy at work. People who really hate a micromanager are going to value that independence. The next is recognition. So being able to offer advancement, potential for leadership, potential for promotion, awards, things that are prestigious. Individuals who value recognition, this is going to be some of the things that they're looking for. Are they going to be able to grow? Are they going to get that pat on the back? Are they going to be able to have awards or honors or things that really, highlight them as an employee? There's also the value of relationships. So this is providing service to other people, having relationships with coworkers, having relationships with supervisors, having a friendly environment, not having like that real cutthroat competitive environment. Really, having that like socially supportive workplace. Support is another one, and this is looking at supportive management. When companies really stand behind and advocate for their employees, if your supervisor is sticking up for you or going to bat for you, having good human relations, or HR. So it's really looking at, how are those company policies aligned? What is how is this company providing support to me in my job? And then working conditions. And this is considering things like safety, job security. Are you working in a place where you feel safe, where you feel protected? Do you know that you're going to have a job next week, that to go back to? So those are the values that are coming up on ONET, and that might be in a lot of the values and interest inventories. You're going to kind of see some of these things. So it's helpful to either be able to talk to people about what these are, to educate them on it, to ask them how they're interpreting these things. What experiences have they had in the past that, demonstrate affirming of some values versus, when you haven't had your values met. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to start identifying values. The first is having basic conversations, but in an intentional way, to get more information out of them about the things that they value. So, really having people describe that environment, describe the interactions between people within the environment. How are your coworkers, or how are your classmates? How did the professors talk to you at your last educational institution? Were they available to you? Did they provide you feedback? Did they make you feel part of a community? Did they kind of like let you do your own thing? So asking lots of these questions and really digging into what those relationships looked like. And then how did it make them feel? You know, right? Like, did you feel good about it? Did you feel supported? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? You know, did you feel like you were under a microscope all the time? Did you feel like you weren't getting enough support or oversight? What was the setting like? You know, was it formal? Was it informal? Was it really strictly ruled by, you know, lots of guidelines and lots of structure and lots of order? Or was it really flexible? You know, what did you dislike about it? What did you like? What skills did you use? Did you feel like you made an impact at the end of the day? Did you feel accomplished when you left for, you know, left your job that day or left your educational program? Did you get to learn? Did you get to grow? Did you get to challenge yourself? And then asking questions, how did you feel at the end of the day? Or like I mentioned before, how did you feel on Sunday night when you were getting ready to go to your job, you know, the next day? Or how did you feel the night before work? You know, were you looking forward to it? Were you dreading it? Though, why? You know, if you were dreading it, why? What was it about it that really just rubbed you? You know, and that was creating that friction. So we want to think about those themes and the things that are standing out as people are telling us these stories. We want to listen with interest and really be able to start to pull out and elicit that information from them. Another way to do it, though, is to use various types of assessment. And I'm going to go ahead and put everyone in the meeting. I'm going to put these in the chat. These are two different card sorts or, you know, values inventories that you can use. And when you get the PowerPoint slides at the end, I've got links to lots of different resources and tools that you can use. You know, some people like having conversations, other people like an assessment. You know, they like to have a tool in front of them. So if you're the kind of person that likes to have a tool, I've got you. There's lots of them in here. So there are different types of values card sorts, and these activities can be really fun. You know, and if you're running, somebody who, you know, runs groups at your organization, it can be a great thing to do in a group room. You know, you can hand somebody a deck of values cards, make sure you've got enough space where they can spread out, and you can show them what some of these things look like. So on this next slide, this is just a screenshot of what the personal values card sort looks like. And this comes like Miller and Rolnick from Motivational Interviewing. William Miller is one of the people who created these personal values card sorts. And there are 83 values plus 3 blank cards in this deck. So it's kind of big. A paper cutter really helps if you want to do a paper and pen one. But people, you ask them to sort this deck of cards into 3 piles. Very important, important, and not important to me. And they go through and they sort those out. And then you might ask them to talk about their top 5 or their top 10 values. And what does it mean to you? How are you interpreting it? How are you defining it? Right? Because the way, you know, just looking at this page, the way I define acceptance might be really different than how Sean defines acceptance, or how Alexis or Marissa or Al define acceptance. So we want to think about, what does that look like? How does it show up in your life? You know, so when we're doing this, we're doing it with the idea to really build insight for the individual, and then also for us as practitioners to get to know more about the person, get to see what matters to them. You know, because when school gets hard, when work gets hard, connecting to those things that matter and our why becomes very important. So that's this values card sort. There's also a work values matcher. And this is, I think, one of the links that I put in the chat, but it's also in the PowerPoint. So this one is great if you don't want to cut out a deck of 85 values cards. This is a computer-based one. And this is through America's Career One Stop. It's a Department of Labor site. And this is nice because you kind of drag and drop. So there's 20 different statements on these square cards in the middle. And you just drag it down to most, more, somewhat, less, and least. So you go through, and again, then you kind of see where you have openings, what becomes more important. You can shuffle them around as you go through to really get to what matters to people when it comes to their work. So the other one is a little bit larger and includes personal values. This one is much more targeted to values, but it provides a great opportunity to really talk more about what this means and how these things show up in the workplace. When you do the work values matcher, once you get them all plunked into those different categories, this gives you results. There's a button you click, and then based on what you dragged and dropped into the different columns, this is kind of what that report might look like for people. And within each of these, there's a description of what that value might mean. And you see these correspond with some of those ONET values that I mentioned earlier. So this is really great because, again, as you're going through and you're talking about different educational and training programs, different career goals, you're talking to the person about what this looks like in the long run. You know, if you're somebody who, you know, achievement is really high, but then you're looking at this field where you're getting zero achievement, you know, it's really not going to support that value. You're going to want to talk about what that might look like in the long run. Again, if you're somebody who really values having great working conditions and really strong supportive work environment, somebody working in isolation in the elements, it might not be a good fit in the long run. So are you going to want to invest time and money in education and training, you know, to get into a job that really isn't aligned with who you are and what you want? So this, again, is a great website. I've got the site linked. There's lots of resources on that site. And again, self-assessments can be really fun for people to build insight and just kind of do something new. And, you know, you click the button and then you get this report and it's personalized about yourself. And it can be a good way to start to engage people, especially if they're coming in and saying, you know, I'm not really sure what I want to do. And then there's also, I've got another link on here. This is 20 Loves, and this talks about kind of the thinking about, you know, your life and the things that you do that fuel you, the people that fuel you, what builds you up. And it helps you to gain insight into, you know, what are the things that matter most to me? And then as the practitioner, you can help the person start to translate that into, you know, how that looks for career. So another area that we do a lot of exploration around during the choose phase of supported education services are interest inventories. So two of the most common you know, things that we see in interest inventory literature are the career clusters and Holland's theory. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these. So it's really important that we're exploring interests when we're working with people around setting educational and employment goals. It's critical to that process of career development. And we want to start to show people that, you know, work can be in line with things that they love to do, especially if it's something that they're investing, you know, time and education into. So we want to expose people to new information through this process and help them really understand what their interests can look like, you know, outside of leisure, and really start to point it toward how can this pivot into something that you could do for work. If you're working with young adults, it really, you know, it really does help them to start, again, learning about themselves a lot more and learning about the world of work. Oftentimes we're exposed to information when we're doing these interest inventories about jobs and fields that we didn't even know exist, right? When you think about it, you know about the jobs that you know about, the things that you're exposed to. You might know about what you see on TV or what people in your community are doing or your family members or friends. But there's a whole world of different professions and jobs and options out there that many of us don't even know exist. So this is doing interest inventories is a great way to expose people to new information. And there's a lot of ways to be able to help people start to think about potential career interests. You know, we start with talking about, current hobbies and those experiences. We can speak to people, within our community, within our network, who might do some of these interesting jobs or work in certain fields. There's lots of different videos, whether it's on YouTube or, the Career One Stop website that are, anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes that give really good overviews of different professions, careers, the skills that are needed, the environments that people work in. And then there's lots of web-based or paper and pen assessments that people can do to explore interests. So, we want to think about, what do you currently like to do? What types of things might you want to do in the future? What's the content, the type of job, the location, level of contact with other people? All of these things can be built into conversation or assessed in more formal ways. So we can easily do various types of self-evaluations, making lists of what your interests are, talking through it, and then being able to talk to people who are employed in those areas of interest. When I worked in career services, I often would use my own network to connect people, so I'd have people come in for supported education or employment services. And, if they said like, oh, I want to be a graphic designer, or I'm interested in landscape, or I'm interested in pursuing accounting, or I'm thinking about engineering, I want to do something in sciences, I would think about too, who do I have in my network? Who can I connect them to? Can I set them up through email so that they can ask some questions? Can we set up, informational interviews to gain more information from a person who's doing the job? There's also job shadowing could be an option for some people. So being able to, again, use your network. If you know of a job site, and arrange for a person to spend a day there. One of my coworkers, she had a family member who worked in a surgical center, and she was able to arrange for one student who was thinking about being a nurse to go in and observe in the surgical suite, which was really unbelievable that she was able to make that happen. But it was so cool to be able to give that person that firsthand experience of, this is what it would be like if you were a nurse working in, a surgical center. So this could be, even more informally, where you're going with people to public buildings or public places and kind of seeing, what do you notice the employees doing? Does this look like things that you'd want to do? Is this the kind of environment that you might like to work in? So, you can kind of talk about that after you're able to have those opportunities of a job shadow. What was it like to spend a day, on site, or a week on site with a person and get to do their job along with them? And then, of course, there's lots of different types of assessments. There's self-directed search, which is, paper and pen inventory based on Holland, who we're going to talk about in a minute. There's the O*NET Interest Profiler. My Next Move is a shortened version of that interest profiler, which is great because you get results that are a little bit more streamlined. And then there's also things like the Career Exploration Inventory, which is based on the career clusters. And even getting ideas, if you use a wellness recovery action plan, there is that wellness toolbox section. A lot of times the things that people put in their wellness toolbox might be really relevant, and a good place to start talking about, what are you interested in? So within the interest inventory, there's lots of different ones. These are two of the main popular ones that you're going to see a lot. The SDS is one of the most thoroughly studied and psychometrically sound career assessments. So if that's something that's really important within your agency, the SDS is definitely the way to go. It's been used in over 1,500 different studies. This was developed in the 70s by a man named John Holland. The most recent revisions, I think, were around 2017, 2018, as far as the questions go, but the occupations are updated consistently. And this asks questions about a person's aspirations, about activities that they want to complete, about what they view as their competencies, their interests. And we're going to come back to that one in just a few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about the Career Exploration Inventory first. So the Career Exploration Inventory, or CEI, was developed by John Liptak based on the Department of Education's 16 career clusters. And the CEI allows users to really create plans based on their interests in both employment, or well, not both, all three areas of employment, education, and leisure activities, which is great because if somebody's coming in for your services and they're a little bit lower on the, do I really want to do this? If they have some unresolved ambivalence still and are kind of in that contemplation phase, sometimes starting off looking at leisure activities helps to then move that needle forward a little bit without jumping too quickly into, let's talk about jobs. But so using the CEI, it doesn't just help people to identify, those work, leisure, learning, but it also helps people to explore, in more general ways, transferable skills that they have at that like career cluster level, which can help lead to a career pathway. So these career clusters that I'm mentioning were developed by the Department of Education in 1996. So for those of you who went to school 96 and after, this might be really familiar to you. Perhaps, your guidance counselor talked about these things, or this was something, you were doing these assessments within your high school, looking at the career cluster. This is a grouping of occupations and it's kind of broad and it's based on various commonalities. These career clusters represent skills and knowledge that are academic and technical, but that people within who are working within this cluster need to know regardless of what more narrow pathway they pick. So we've got these 16 clusters. From there, it goes out to 79 career pathways. And each pathway then has a more specific knowledge and skill requirement. Within those pathways, there are almost 2,000 different career specialties. So we have these broader clusters, narrows to pathways, and then to specialties. So the cluster is a really great way to start, getting a sense of like, okay, we're in this region. So now where are we going to go from there to kind of narrow down what you might want to do? So lots of different clusters. They're all listed on these slides. They include agriculture, food and natural resources, to hospitality and tourism, to marketing, science, finance, lots of different types of things. So the CEI really helps people to get a sense of like, what are my top clusters? Where do I want to start exploring? And, how is this connected to both employment, work, and leisure activities? What do I want to start doing to learn more about these types of things? And this career assessment, so when you're using the paper and pen one, it opens up into like a big, huge poster almost. And on the back, you're able to do the different plans of, what do I want to try? How do I want to explore more into this cluster area? So it's a really, it's a very comprehensive interest assessment. And it's really a great jumping off point if somebody's coming in unclear of what they want to do or where they want to start looking. And then moving back over into Holland's theory of career choice and the self-directed search and what we see on ONET and My Next Move. This theory, again, has been very well researched and studied. And John Holland was the person who created the self-directed search. And he believed that the choice of vocation is an expression of personality. So think about that quote for a second. The choice of vocation is an expression of personality. What do you think about that? Do you think the work you do is a means of personal expression? Do you think it's connected to who you are, to your personality type? Do you think that some of your personality traits make you particularly well suited for the work you do? Anyone agree with that or disagree? Got one, absolutely. Yeah, and according to Holland, different professions attract different personality types. Different types of people are kind of drawn to and tend to be successful at different types of jobs. So Holland believed that finding the right job is essential to keeping it. And a lot of people are unsure of what direction to look for in a career. And that might be related to, a lack of awareness about what's important to you in a job or career. So when we're thinking about this helps to build that awareness of who you are and how that's connected to the profession, that you're thinking about going into. So we're looking at all of those things and doing this assessment and building this information and looking at the labor market data and then, trying to really ensure that this process is intentional. So Holland had 6 main points to his career theory. And this is just like touching the surface of Holland's theory of career choice. But first up is that people search for environments where they can use their skills and abilities and express their values and attitudes. Again, as I'm going through these points, think about if it rings true for you, if it rings true for what you've seen, in the work that you're doing. The next is how you act and feel at work depends on your work environment. So according to Holland, if you're working with people who have a personality type like yours, you tend to feel more comfortable with them than if you're, kind of that square peg in a round hole. Type 3 is that most people are one of 6 personality types, and we're going to get to a little bit more on these in just a sec. So this theory of career choice is sometimes known as the RIASEC, and that's because it stands for realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. So these are the 6 personality types identified by Holland. And he also feels that there are 6 basic types of work environments that have the same traits as people. So looking at that, as people, we have these traits, and then the work environments have these traits. And people of the same personality type working together in a job create a work environment that best fits their type, and it rewards that type. So people who choose to work in an environment similar to their personality type are more likely to be successful and satisfied within that type. So for example, if you are a really artistic, creative, flexible person, and you're working in an environment that nurtures that and that rewards creative thinking and behavior, you're really going to thrive, with that flexibility. But if you're somebody who values order and structure and routine and detail, and you're in this kind of like free-flowing, artistic, creative environment, it might not be a good match. You might not feel be as successful or feel as satisfied within that environment. So here are the 6 types. The first is realistic. So these, you can think of the doers. They're people who engage in physical activity. They tend to like being outdoors, working with their hands, working with plants or animals. They'd rather work with things than with like ideas or with people. They typically will say like they like to learn by doing. They want to get their hands dirty. They want to get in there. They want to try it out. They want action. They value things that can be seen and touched, and they tend to be really practical and task-oriented individuals. The next area is the thinkers. These tend to be really analytical, intellectual, observant people. They use logic. They like problems. They like thinking in abstract ways. They like ambiguous challenges. They tend to enjoy research, math, scientific activities. They tend to be more introspective and often prefer working, in an autonomous fashion. And this might be somebody like a lab tech or a physician, a management consultant, some college professors. Then we've got our artistic individuals. These are our creators. They enjoy creative activities, composing music, writing, drawing, painting, acting, thinking outside the box, thinking of new and imaginative ways to do it. They often seek opportunities to express themselves through creative expression or artistic expression. They tend to prefer flexibility. They don't like a lot of deadlines. They tend to like ambiguity, and they have a bit of an aversion to kind of conformity or convention. Our next area is the helpers. The helpers are concerned with the welfare of other people. They enjoy participating in group activities, helping, training, healing. They may avoid activities where they are stuck in front of a computer or a piece of equipment all day. They tend to be idealistic, socially responsible, and focused on relationships and trying to solve problems through the discussion and interpersonal skills. This tends to be our teachers, counselors, ministers, social workers, speech pathologists, human resource officers, all kind of live in this helper space. Then we've got our enterprising group, or the persuaders. This might be politicians, real estate agents, stockbrokers, even bartenders, who kind of enjoy activities that require them to persuade others, like in sales. They often seek out leadership roles. They tend to be really energetic, ambitious, adventurous, confident, social. And they, like the helpers, are invigorated by interpersonal connection, but this is more in a means for leadership, obtaining goals, obtaining gains. They tend to be really effective public speakers, and they value power and promotion, that kind of like prestige or achievement. And then finally, we have our conventional individuals, and these are the organizers. They're skilled in and often enjoy manipulating data, organizing, scheduling, operating different types of equipment. They're really conscientious, very organized, good attention to detail. They prefer well-defined instructions. They value rules, they value order, they value structure. You want this person as your bookkeeper or as your actuary, as your records person. This is who you want. So in going through these, does anybody see themselves in any of them? And now within the self-directed search, you typically get a 3-letter code, your top 3 of these characteristics. And they're in a particular order. I don't think I have a slide with the order, but it's the Holland hexagon. So they kind of go in order. And the things that are closest together tend to be the most similar or complementary. And the things that are across the hexagon from each other tend to be more opposite. Marissa, yeah, so you have SCI. Anyone else have others? So when I do this training in person and when we have a little bit more time than 90 minutes, typically I will have people do one of these assessments, and we kind of take a guess at like, what do you think you are? And then what comes up. Typically nobody's that surprised, and usually most of the people in the room have that, have a helper piece to them, sometimes pairing the artistic, sometimes pairing the conventional or the investigative, because usually in the spaces that we work, we have to use all of those things, to connect and engage. And then other times people will say, my code is coming up more representative of the things that I do outside of work and what demonstrates, how I am in my personal life or my leisure activities. So that's Holland. So again, there's a number of ways to get a Holland code. The self-directed search is, one way, but using My Next Move or the O-Net Interest Profiler are other ways to get your Holland code. And you're going to see these letters appear, on some of the different like job databases and O-Net and things like that. So this will come up. And again, this is people usually think this is pretty fun to do, to get their code and to start looking into it and to see what professions pop up as aligned with their code. So the SDS measures the degree to which you resemble the personality types based on your responses. And it produces this 3-letter summary code, which is kind of that like complexity of your personality. So a summary code of like an RIA, for example, is realistic, investigative, and artistic personality type. So according to the theory, the same personality types apply to those work environments, right? So then if your code is RIA, you would then look up what are all the professions that fall under RIA. And that would be a kind of a jumping off point. And it's so interesting to do this, and some of the professions are things that you've heard about or that you know, and then there's other things that come up that you would have never thought about. And they come up at all different levels of education and experience. So for somebody who has not gotten education, not gotten any training yet, no experience in the field, it tells you what jobs that they might be qualified for, what they could do. And then if you get a little more experience, what jobs might fit. And then if you get a lot of education and experience, then it shows you kind of what you're qualified for. So, you take that code that you get from doing an SDS or a My Next Move, and then it's you're able to use that to start to explore various professions at different levels of education. So you get your summary code, and those are the things that, according to this theory, say that might help you to be more satisfied and successful at work. So I encourage you, if you're coming to training 2 in 2 weeks, I would love if you take the opportunity, if you haven't done it, to do a My Next Move or to do, an interest profiler on ONET, and come back and get your code, see what it is, see if there are things that surprise you about what's coming up within your code, and then look at the professions that it recommends you doing. So the next thing that we do, so we look at our values, we look at our interests, we also want to explore what our preferences are. And this is we do through analyzing some of the experiences that we've had. And we want to get the reactions to the people, places, and activities in those environments. So you want people to describe really specific characteristics of the people, places, and activities. And you might be doing this when you're also getting that sense of, values, and you want to connect them to what were your feelings about the people in that environment? What were your feelings about the places and activities? What were your reasons for it? What did you like? What didn't you like? What do you think you want to do again? What do you want to do differently? So we're asking these questions, and we're kind of doing it twofold. One, to get to values, and one to get to preferred environment, preferred types of people that you're working with. So for example, we're thinking about, I want coworkers who are fun to be with. I want people who are going to make me laugh or have great conversation. I want a supervisor who's going to listen to me, and feel like I'm heard and I'm supported. Places, I want there to be color and light and it to be a vibrant place, or I want it to be located in a walkable neighborhood so that I can go get a cup of coffee and lunch, and I can walk to work because there's no good public transportation, so you're really thinking about what is this environment? What are the people going to look like? What are the preferences? And then as far as activities, do you want to work with people? Do you want steady work? Do you want part-time work? And all of these things are going to shape those career decisions, right? So if you're the kind of person, like in this example, who wants lots of coworkers, who wants a supervisor who's going to be there and be listening, who wants like this fun, bright environment, you're not going to want to select a job and get 4 years of a bachelor's degree, to do something where you're sitting in front of a computer by yourself in like a dim office. So these things are going to matter in the long run. And then what feelings come up about this? Is it feelings related to safety, to happiness, to satisfaction, to, how is that connecting to your mental health and to your wellness? And then what are the reasons for some of those things? So it's all about building awareness for the person, for you, and to be able to better inform the goals that you're writing and the decisions that are being made. So we do all of that, right? We do the interests, values, preferences. We're getting a sense of what the person is wanting. But then we also have to present and teach people to look for labor market and career information. So when I first started out in career services, I worked with one person who really wanted to be a meteorologist. which was interesting. I'd never worked with somebody who wanted to be a meteorologist before, and they had a bachelor's degree in meteorology, and they were looking to go to graduate school and wanted to see what they had to do to be a meteorologist. But part of the work that we also had to do together was, are there jobs for a meteorologist? And is that okay with you if jobs aren't plentiful? So we did a lot of that, and looking, and considering where are jobs available. At the time, I was working in more of like the northern part of New Jersey, not too far from New York. And there were meteorologist jobs available in New York. They were not super plentiful. But to do, my due diligence in working in career services, as this person is telling me, I want to go to grad school and I'm going to take on student loans, we have to think about, what is the salary potential and what is the likelihood of gaining employment if you do this, so that the person's able to make an informed decision about it, so they know what they're getting into. You're able to weigh, is it worth taking this loan for this? If I take, if I go down this path, is it better if I move, or are there jobs in my area? Is this an in-demand occupation that's going to continue to grow so that I can have a thriving career ahead of me? Or is this an industry that's kind of dying off and it's going to be a little bit tougher to find jobs? So once you get that information, it's not our job to say, yes, you should do this, or no, you shouldn't, right? But this is the information. You can make an informed decision now that you've got it. So when we're talking about, all of these things and looking at these professions, part of that is to then get some of this information and to, look at some of the Bureau of Labor data, look at the ONET data and see, is this growing? What's the likelihood? So we want to use information about our interests, values, preferences, skills to figure out what our path is. But then we have to gather this other information. What's needed to be in that career? What skills do you need? As a first-gen college student, I had very little idea about like higher education and what that looked like and what professional careers looked like. And I remember, I wanted to be a psychology major. I was the first in my family, to go to college. And I thought, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get my bachelor's degree and I'm going to be a psychologist and I'm going to have a private practice and I'm going to have the little sand trays and the little light on the door and calming music, and it's going to be fantastic. I had no idea that you couldn't be a psychologist with a bachelor's degree. In my 17-year-old mind, you went to college and you had your career, and that was that. So we want to be able to provide information to people about what their path actually looks like, not just what they see on TV or not just what their assumptions are, but really, what are the skills that you need? What are the day-to-day tasks? How much money are you going to make? Do you need to continue your education beyond, an associate degree, beyond a certificate? What is licensure looking like? What is long-term career steps? So when we're building this information, there's a number of ways to do it. And we could do it through a variety of different, books. People can go to the library if they so choose and get them. There's government agencies that have a lot of information, trade unions and professional organizations, and a number of different websites, including ONET, Department of Labor, American Job Center's Career One Stop, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. ONET and American Job Center Career One Stop are two of my favorites. I have them both linked in here as well. And here's a little bit more information. Again, if we had a longer session, typically I like to kind of give people the ONET tour because there's so much information packed into that website. If you're not familiar with it, I really encourage you to just bookmark it and play around. There's lots of different tools related to, personal assessments that people can take. You can there's a specific section just for veterans if you're working with a veterans population that talks about transferable skills. There's things for people who are changing careers, tons and tons of career information. So this is an online database. They have, and now it's probably up to about 1,000 different titles. Oh, Sherry, don't worry, I'll get there. It's on the next slide. And it's, this is kind of, they had taken the old Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which was like a published tome and is now online. But it's really fantastic for lots of information. The next one I like that I had said was this American Job Center Career One Stop website. This also has lots of different tools. There are tools for people with disabilities, tools for career changers, tools for people who've been out of work for a long time, also tools for veterans. On here, there's lots of information. There's career videos, which I really like. There's like short little video clips about different professions. There's videos about the different career clusters. There's also skill-based videos. You know, so if it's saying something like you need to have attention to detail, well, what does that mean, attention to detail? You could watch this little video and it'll show you what it means and how that shows up in different professions. There's salary data here. There's different educational resources. There's links to apprenticeship information. There's also that work values assessment or sorter that I showed you earlier. That's on this website too. So again, bookmark that one, play around, lots and lots of resources. But through these sites, people are able to gather fact-based information about what these careers actually look like and what education and training is connected to them. And then there's this other one, it's Advanced CTE, Learning That Works Resource Center. And this has a lot of information about career and technical education and like career and technical fields. So this is helpful if you have somebody who does not want to go like a traditional academic based program, but really wants, you know, typically CTE programs tend to be shorter term and get you right into your career. There's also really great opportunities for apprenticeships within CTE fields where people can be working and earning money while they complete their classroom-based hours. So that's a great option for somebody who does not want to do like the whole gen eds and traditional academic side of things, but wants to earn a livable wage, you know, in a skill-based occupation. So when we're thinking about, you know, going through these different websites and looking up the various professions, we want to think about, you know, and point out to people too, what are the attractive aspects? What are the benefits of this job? What appeals to you about this job? What are the costs versus benefits? You know, are there things that are kind of drawbacks? Let's talk about those. Let's weigh those. What are the job requirements? So what knowledge do you have about what's required to do this job and to be successful in this job? What are the characteristics as they relate to your preferences? You know, if you're seeing this job is, you know, you really wanted something where you were going to be outside and you're realizing in looking at some of the ONET data that, oh, this job is like 75% indoors when you thought it was going to be the reverse. Is that okay? Does it matter? What is that, you know, how is that related? What resources are available to you within this field? What skills and knowledge do you need to have to do the job well? And then what are your support needs? You know, is it financial? Is it wellness based? Is it executive functioning? Is it transportation? You know, what else might get in your way and how can we start to problem solve that together? So that's the next piece. So we've got our interests, values, preferences. We have our career related information. And then from there, we get that career data and then we get a sense of, okay, what level of education does the person need to have? So from there, we start to think about that educational environment that might be a good fit. So, you know, again, think about how did you decide on your type of education? You know, was it that you knew what career you wanted and you sought the education and the certifications or license that was the right fit? Was it that, oh, well, everybody's doing it, so I'm going to that place? Was it that you returned later? So think about some of those factors because I'm sure there's lots of people that you're working with who are going to have all different types. So often people consider things like academic rigor, desire for employment, career goals, financial restrictions, family obligations, services available, the amount of time, like the length of the degree, and then the supports that are available. Based on those things and based on what's important to the person, you're going to want to consider what level of education, is going to be the best fit. So is that, adult education, certificate, career and technical, associate level, bachelor level, graduate degree. I'm going to move through these really quick. Adult education typically is kind of a skill development. It might be a good introduction to technology. There's typically not a ton of supports available, but usually pretty flexible, low stakes with the adult education. Certificate programs tend to be short-term or shorter in time frame. These typically are geared toward people looking to refine skills or gain additional skills. Sometimes now there's kind of micro badges that people can get in addition to certificate programs, again, tend to be more short-term, really kind of specific, tend to be very vocationally focused for your unique field. These aren't always for credit, but sometimes they can be. It's something to kind of note. And these really, certificates or micro badges can, depending on the field, can really help to increase vocational marketability and being able to increase your likelihood of getting jobs. If you're somebody who's been out of work for a really long time, when I was in supported employment, sometimes I'd have people who'd been out of work for 10, 15, 20 years. They were returning, they had a degree, but it was really outdated. So one of the things to make them more marketable was, okay, let's get this certificate, let's get these certifications up to speed, especially for people in, some of the tech fields that change happens really quick. They need to stay current. So this might be a great option. Usually these are at post-secondary educational settings or available online. And there's some campus-based supports available depending where the person is doing it. Another level of education is CTE, which tends to be more vocationally focused. Again, this may or may not be used for college credit. People should certainly find out if they can do the CTE program and, if it transitions into credit-based. A lot of CTE, well, I shouldn't say this. Some CTE programs are not covered by financial aid. It depends on the environment, depends on the program. That can be a drawback if they're not covered by financial aid, because they do tend to be expensive, for somebody to have to find a loan or pay out of pocket or seek vocational rehabilitation services for. However, they're typically short term and it gets you quickly into the job market. Apprenticeships might be a really good way to fund career and technical education based programs. Depending on the program, there may or may not be formalized disability related support services available. So if it's a CTE at a college or a community college, you're going to get disability services, you'll be able to access accommodations. But if it's at a private for-profit program, that's going to kind of vary depending on the program, and the level of support might vary. So this is, it's important to kind of ask for placement rates, check the Better Business Bureau if you're going to a program, that is a private for-profit. Make sure that it's not a scam program, because sometimes those pop up. Associate level, typically shorter term educational opportunity, can get you access to entry level positions within the primary labor market. But many professions do require, advanced training. If you're like in New Jersey, we have an NJ transfer website, and you can kind of see most associate degree programs at state schools will transfer into a bachelor's program. Many of these tend to be highly vocationally focused, such as like an LPN, a licensed practical nurse, where you're able to go right from the associate level into a good paying job. So these are typically great for students with different learning styles, non-traditional students, and there tends to be, lots of supports available on campuses. Bachelor's degree is the other level of education. This is a more long-term educational program, so you're going to want to talk to people about that. How much time do you want to invest? Are you going to invest 4 to 8 years to get a bachelor's degree? Do you have that much time? Do you want to start somewhere else? But this is good for people who are career oriented in that means. Campuses tend to be really resource rich. So there's going to be tutoring, there's going to be, there might be counseling, there might be peer support, there's going to be disability services. available. Quality will vary based on program. And then, of course, graduate degrees tend to be more highly specialized content, career and professional focused, highest wages, lowest unemployment for people with graduate degrees. So important to educate people on that career ladder and what do your goals look like now? Are you going to do a stepping stone approach? Or are you going to kind of just go for different levels? And that's going to depend on each person's personal circumstance. So once you start to narrow that down, you want to systematically help people to assess the educational environments that are right for them. So based on their interests, values, preferences, the labor market information, they'll start to create that personal criteria list. So is it cost? Is it size? Is it class size? Is it location, campus life, program, class schedule, flexibility, acceptance of credits that I have from another university? So they'll create that big master list. And then you'll start to look at what are the potential educational opportunities available for them and go through and evaluate the schools. So in here, I've got kind of just a little worksheet. And if you're a worksheet person, here you go. So have the person plug in what is their criteria and define it. How do you define close to home? How do you define small class size? And then you list the schools. So here is a completed one. It might be a little bit tough to see on the PowerPoint, but when you get the slides, you'll be able to check it out. So class size, a student might say, I don't want more than 25 students per class. I don't want those big lecture hall classes. So you're gonna, as you're looking at assessing schools and going on the different websites with people, you can check off, what was it like at this college? Did it meet your criteria here? Did it not meet your criteria? What notes do you have? Do you want to now take a tour of this school or get more information? Do you want to apply there? So this really helps you to start pulling those preferences in and helping the person really look at, these are the schools available to me. Do they meet my criteria? Do they meet my needs? Am I going to get what I want out of this educational institution? Education is costly and it's a big time commitment. So really teaching people and taking them through this process in an intentional way can help prevent them getting there and saying like, oh, I signed up because a bunch of my friends went here, and then realize it's not what they want or what they need for their career. So, when we're choosing when we're working through our choose phase of career development, we are really focused on making sure we're clarifying interests, values, preferences, skill set. We're gathering that career and labor market information so people can make informed choices about, likelihood of employment, skills, work environment, salary. We're assessing the level of education that's needed depending on their goals and where they are right now. We're helping people to identify what their personal criteria is within those educational environment. And then that's where we really start to put together that recovery plan or support plan of how are we going to take you from the things that you want to do into moving into that get phase of service where we're implementing the plan and beginning to implement it for achieving those goals. And that's what we're going to talk about, in our get phase in our next session in 2 weeks. So I would love for you to put in the chat things that, something that you might like to try out or a resource you want to explore before our next session. And then if there's anything else that you specifically want more information on for us to include in sessions 2 and 3, please also put that in the chat and we'll be able to weave that into our future sessions. Are there any questions? I know I covered a lot of information in a really short time frame. So please feel free to unmute or to use the chat. Resources, that are all loaded up in here. So you'll get that too. Look at the SDS. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, they are. They're fantastic to be able to use. And I've always found that people enjoy doing them, which is even better because then you're kind of able to engage people in that process. Well, thank you so much for being here, everyone. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you in our next session. Sean, did you want to do the wrap up for MHTTC?
Yep, sounds good. Well, thanks again, Brittany. Lots of great information and lots of great tools. I think, there's a tool probably for everything that we could be hoping to try to get some information out of. So I'm just going to put in the chat here feedback survey that I had brought up earlier. Our funding is tied to the completion of these surveys. So if you could take a minute or two just to fill it out, that would be a lot of help for us. So I put that in the chat, the link for that. We also invite you to listen to our podcast channel, Towards Wellness and Recovery. You can find that on Spotify, Apple, Podbean, anything like that. Just so everyone knows, the recording of this presentation will be put on our website within 7 days. So I'll put a link in the chat of our website, so you can find that if you want to review any of that information once we post that up. We'll also send out certificate of completions. So those will automatically be emailed out to anyone that was on this within a week also. And we hope that you enjoyed the presentation today. The link has all of our information. So if you wanted to get onto that email list or follow us on any social media, our information is on there. And if there's no other comments, I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Al.